My name's Joanne Carl. I teach in broadcast media production. These are my students well, not the students running the cameras here. I can be very proud of them. I forgot my little clicker, sorry. I had a similar experience with everything not going as planned, which is really a good exercise in learning, I think. And so I wanted to just go over how it worked with me. But first, I had a couple of guiding quotes, and these came from some of the literature that we read, which was just awesome. Not just to read, but within that cohort to discuss what we read really helped us to learn from one another and to solidify what we were reading. One of my favorite things was that what students want. They want to be intrigued, they want to generate their own ideas, and they want to voice their opinions. So I hear a lot of that when you teach journalism. I say as many times as I can, there's no opinions in journalism, but a way to take your opinion but find facts that support and also find other people's opinions to include them. So I thought that was really important, particularly for our students. And the next one was because I feel like there's a little bit of an overemphasis on active learning for the sake of active learning. And I loved that it talks about, we place the brunt of our instructional design efforts towards building thinking skills and cognitive growth. Sort of do something active in order to make sure that you're working on that cognitive growth part. So I think that was really important. So I teach, the idea of the cohort was to set something up in the fall that you would then implement in the spring. But as you can see, I teach different courses in the spring from the fall. So I planned for a fall course that also had a little trouble and it just didn't run. So I had made a plan for that. So I adapted and switched. The original course was a 200-level capstone course. And so it was very different because what I changed to was an intro course with those skills and the facts that they need to know. So but it really worked out well. I mean, I was proud that it worked out well with what I did. So my strategy was to use PowerPoints. Well, that's an old thing, right? Except the PowerPoints are a guide. Sometimes that PowerPoint would sit on the screen for a half hour while we discussed it. Sometimes the PowerPoint would be projected on the whiteboard so that students would then fill in the blanks on the whiteboard or do their own thing. We'll see a little example of that. So it was partially to guide as a lesson plan, partially a reference because those PowerPoints or pieces of them could be uploaded. Partially reminders, and you'll see an example of that, but a lot of it was designed to just support engagement. And nobody thinks of PowerPoints as engaging, but that was my challenge there, okay? So I went to, this is an example. So on the first day of advanced broadcast journalism, I showed the students what they'd be doing on the last day of advanced broadcast journalism. They'd be producing a live newscast. They'd be in the studio, they'd be directing, like Cody, they're directing. I don't know if any of you guys made this one. So they would see and put themselves in the roles that they would be in. But before they could do this, they would have to create the content for that newscast. So on the first day, we talked about meaningful content and remembered what they had learned in all the prerequisite courses. So this is one of those slides that sits up on the screen for a half hour while you talk about what did you remember from this course about visuals? What do you remember from this course about your target audience? What do you remember about what is newsworthy? And I'm sure that they could all repeat that right now because we drill that into them. And then also it's a reminders. So this one I printed out and I'd hand them to people right as they were about to take out a camera and say, you need to remember, be sure you get good sound, all of those things, the things that I want in their ear as they're out there working with a highly technical camera like this, remembering the things they needed to remember. So that was sort of a reminder. And then I could take what we're doing on Thursday, I could say, here's what we're gonna do Friday. We have a 4-hour lab. Here's what we're gonna do, so be prepared for this. That could also be screenshotted and put on Blackboard as an announcement, so they really know what's happening that Friday. So that's one course. So I've tried working with these engaging PowerPoints in several classes, so I would be ready in the fall to work with the new class. So this is a broadcast management class. This one is one of those typical PowerPoints, just full of information they needed for a discussion board. So they could go back to that, refer to that, and then bring all of those important facts into it. Also, we talked a lot about time management in this broadcast management class. This is one that you would project onto the screen, onto the whiteboard. One student gets is asked to be timer. Two students come up and get markers, and the first student writes out the phrase, "Switch tasking is a thief," and then writes the numbers 1 to 22. And that's easy, and we write the time on the board. And then the second student writes S1, W2, I3, they have to go between letter and numbers, and then write the time, just to illustrate how hard it is to go from one thing to the other very quickly. And in time management, that's something, and for students who are, juggling a lot of courses, that's a really important thing to know. So that's one way of using it for active learning. And then we also spent a lot of time with that, discussing why the differences between multitasking and switch tasking. So that's just sort of examples. So then when it came to actually taking this engagement strategy and working with it, the course was TVRA 140 video editing. And I used it on the first day of every week, we used a PowerPoint. The second day that we met usually was more of a lab. But it was very easy to give them a recap of what was happening. You can see that some things, what they will be learning, with a little bit of fun with icons. And then the final slide always included the homework. And also, one thing I learned from my cohort, from Bruce, was to be giving them in-class mini quizzes, very brief, but they would be a PowerPoint mini quiz up on the PowerPoint that they could either write down the answers, or I tried a lot of different modalities for these mini quizzes. Could they all log into Blackboard and do a mini quiz? That worked mostly, so I tried a lot of different things on those. And so that really helped it with the adapted plan. It also really helped it with some of the concepts that are harder, that really need some illustration. So I can describe to them and give them a very specific definition of what keyframing is, for example. But I also could give them, it would lead my lecture to the demo. So I would give a definition, show this, and then immediately shut down PowerPoint and go to an in-class demo of what that is, using the software, the video editing software that they would be using. So I spent a lot of time going from PowerPoint to software, to standing in front of them in the whiteboard, to PowerPoint to software, and then for them coming up and standing and doing things with the whiteboard. So that it really helped to lead that. It wasn't just PowerPoint, it really helped to lead that. So it came time to assess that plan, and we had determined ahead of time what the assessment would be. And this course is very hands-on. It has only midterm. And after midterm, they're really assessed by their final projects. So there's not another test with points after that, because they need to know all of these, the terminology and skills, and then they apply those skills in the second half of class. So my assessment plan was compare midterm scores to the previous 4 sections, and to compare rubric scores for the final videos, and to then reflect on all of those, the anecdotal and formative assessments. So the midterm scores didn't improve, and I'm not sure why, but I was a little disappointed, but then I was surprised, because I felt like it was going so well, right? And I realized there might be a couple things I could do differently. They were just exactly the same. And it may have been that this was a little different class. I noted that 4 students dropped after midterm. There were family issues that, like, we see quite often. But that assessment really did help me for the future, to make sure that I either take that test and relate it more to what we've gone over, or go over things more that are going into the test. There might be something I can tweak, which is a really good thing to figure out. The final projects, this is I was going to show a video, but we don't really have much time, of the final projects. And I don't know if I can even do that from here, because it's on there. But what I did get, I really want to be able to pause it and everything, so I'm not sure if I can do that. What I will say about the final projects and the rubrics, the students who stayed in the class, their final project scores were higher than they had ever been before. More than that, their final projects were much more thoughtful. The final projects in video editing, an example would be the night I went out to trick-or-treating, or, sort of good videos for an intro class, but not as thoughtful. Whereas this semester, one final was from a Brazilian student, and it was all in Portuguese, but it really talked about the political situation there. And it had some music involved, and it was just a much higher level. One was a student who was very shy at the beginning, and his final project was called Life Hacks, and it was how to not sleep in class, or how to, all really cute things, And the third one that I really enjoyed was a student who came in, my impression of him was rough, tough guy, right? Well, his final project was about a program for diabetics that limit the number of finger sticks. And it was educational, but he did it in a gym with basketball and, that kind of thing. So I got a lot deeper meaning in the video projects, just not what I wanted on the point score. But I find that as a win. So thank you very much for listening.